to come down. So I'll start, but I promise that I won't go super long. But if you can't hear me, then raise your hand, but it sounds to me like the microphone's on a good level. There's some coming down from the balcony, yeah. Some of you have asked, how did I get even involved in this? Well, when Roger passed away in August of 2021, you're kind of at loose ends and you think, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was 67 at the time. And so I started in the early part of this year Googling mission and volunteering opportunities. And I came across a website for global volunteers, and they're out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And because they were out of St. Paul, I dared to Google down or click down a little further in it because I figured they might be a little bit more legit. So I clicked in, and they said, what's your experience? First of all, it was, what are your skills? Okay, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a doctor, but okay, I know how to talk to people because I was in sales. Then it clicked down and it's like, give us your resume. And so I said that I had been in facsimile sales, and then I forgot to tell them I had been a national sales trainer, but I did tell them I had worked with Lutheran Disaster Response after the St. Peter tornado. And I did that with Lutheran Disaster Response for a year and a half. And I went from St. Peter tornado to Oklahoma tornado, and then I went to North Carolina flood. And of course, Raj and I were married, and I had been gone a lot with my traveling job of sales training. So I decided, you're in a very sad spot all the time when you're working with disaster victims because it's fresh and new to them. Every disaster, so you carry that in your heart at night. I had a hard time just letting it go. So anyway, I put that I'd been with Lutheran Disaster Response. Well, 2 weeks later, boom, I get an email back and said, would you consider going to Poland to work with Ukrainian women and children who have fled the war? And oh boy, I was like, okay, sometimes I was thinking I'd go somewhere in 2023, like in the United States. And so this was like super big. I did have a passport. And so I walked around it for a little bit, and then I decided this must be what I'm supposed to do. And I don't know if any of you noticed today during church, we were singing the song, Here I Am, Lord. When I was a budding 7th grade clarinet student, I'd play that song out of the hymnal for practice at home. And when I heard it today, I was a Missouri Synod Lutheran kid back then, so they didn't want you to go into the ministry or anything, but today when I heard it, it just seemed fitting, and that's kind of how I felt about this trip, was that it was my calling. So that's how I got there in the first place. You had to make all your own reservations. You had to get yourself there, but I did it. So the map of Poland, there's a star where Warsaw is. That is the capital. And if you look about an inch over, the first town is it's pronounced Shelce. It's S-I-E-D-L-C-E, but pronounced Shelce. And that's where I was in the country, about 20 miles outside of Shelce. So you can see Belarus, Ukraine, Poland are right on that side of the country. Poland is a country about just slightly larger than Minnesota. They have a population of 33 million people. Minnesota has a population between 5 and 6 million people. They are primarily an agricultural country just like us, so a lot of that land is in agriculture. So all those 33 million people live primarily in the cities. And they live in flats and apartment buildings and not much single-family dwelling that I saw anyway. And Poland, when I was there, had taken in 44.4 million refugees from this war. That was in July. I looked it up today, and as of today, they've taken in 5.5 million refugees. That is the population of Minnesota moving into the size of a state of Minnesota. Now, not all of them have stayed. Some came in, brought their families, got them settled, and left, or had family elsewhere in the world, so they came through Poland, stayed for a while, and left elsewhere. But primarily, those first 4.4 million people that came in went into people's homes, because Poland didn't have places to just bring refugees. So people said, hey, yeah, I have an attic, I have a basement, I have a garage, I have whatever. Because again, they were thinking this was going to be a short-term war. Those people have now been there 8 months. The people I worked with did not get there in the beginning. They were bombed. These women fled after bombing, and they had 90 minutes to leave their home. So that's where that was. So as we're looking at this map, down in the southeast corner, there is a town called Rzeszów. It's R-Z-E-S-Z-O-W, but pronounced Rzeszów. So you can see the Russian language, or the Polish language is very difficult. About 35% of those that have fled are settled in that community. So they're in the southeast side of Poland, and down by, I can't tell exactly where it's at on this map. It's kind of blurred. But anyway, so a ways from Russia. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Whoops, back.
Червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину піднімемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, гей, гей, розвеселимо. Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину піднімемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, гей, гей, розвеселимо. Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину піднімемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, гей, гей, розвеселимо.
That is a song that the country has adopted as their unity song for this war. That girl was a refugee. She is now in Lithuania, where they did that video. I was going to town in the back seat of my director's car. Another team member and I were going to buy school supplies for our kids that we were teaching. And this little boy, David, was in the back seat of the car, and out comes that song all by himself, singing from the beginning to the end. Even now, as I tell you, my hair stands up on my arms because they're all committed like that, no matter their age. And these kids have seen a lot. They fled with 90 minutes to spare. This is the Polish hello. Dzień dobry is how you say that. That means hello. The language, I was told, is the hardest language to learn than Mandarin Chinese. But in Russia, you can see how hello is, and in Ukrainian. Both Russia and Ukraine use the Cyrillic alphabet. So even for Ukrainians and Polish people to talk, though there are some similarities, it is different. And so you can imagine 4.5 million people flooding into your communities, and this is the obstacle you need to overcome. I was there 2 weeks, and I know Dzień dobry, so I mean, that's about it. This camp where I stayed is called Remontovka, and it was built by the Pulitzer Prize winner Vladislav Remont's widow. He wrote the book, The Peasants. This is just the front building. There's a side building which housed us. Now, we're out in the country, 20 miles from Shellee and 8 miles from where the Ukrainians stayed. When we arrived, it was raining that night, and normally they wouldn't even let you in the house when it's raining before welcoming you outside on the doorstep. But they had to let us in because it was kind of pouring rain. So we got in, and we were presented with bread, salt, and vodka. That is their traditional welcome. You put the bread and the salt, a little bit of salt goes in the holes of the bread, you eat that, and then you shoot the vodka back. You don't have to have the vodka if you're, they're not like they're gonna kick you out. But they do this because during the war, World War II and previous wars, when they were fighting, this is what they survived on: potato vodka, bread, and salt. This is Mój polski jest zły. That means my Polish is bad. And that's kind of how I felt the whole time I was there. There were several team members that had been there several times, not to the camp, but in Poland, because their father was Polish, so they had a little bit better grasp of the language. But for me, it was, every time I wanted to say something, it wouldn't come out fast enough, and the moment it passed me by, it's one of those. Sunflowers are the flower to represent Ukraine. Now, when I went there, I told you I was going there to work with Ukrainian women and children, which is what I thought I was going there for. And when I got to the airport, I found out I would be teaching English to 8 and 10-year-olds of Polish descent, not Ukrainian descent. And at first, I was very upset about this, I'll have to tell you. And one of the teammates, she missed her flight in Amsterdam, so she came in the next day. And when she got there, she also was very upset because she thought she was coming there to work with Ukrainian women and children. And so the next morning, we had a team breakfast, and our director, Penny, the one from that came in late, she was crying, and she said, "I don't even like kids. I don't know how I'm going to do this, And so we had a discussion, and I finally said, me, I don't really like to rock the boat, but I said, you know what, I'm a little upset too, because I thought I was coming here. That's what the email said. Well, here's what happened. When I inquired in the early spring, and they came back 2 weeks later and said, are you willing to work with Ukrainian women and children? And I said yes. Then they asked me, could I come in June? And I said, well, no, because in June, my niece was getting married. She had waited 2 years, and she's my goddaughter, so I couldn't come then. Could I come later? And sure, So then when I got back from the wedding, I checked, and they said, yeah, we have an opening for 2 weeks in July. Well, what they failed to tell me was June was for the Ukrainian kids at camp. July was for the Polish kids at camp. And so, okay, what am I going to do? I'm there. I'm going to make the best of it. And so it was a little bit like tap dancing in high heels here, learning. I knew I was going to be teaching, but I thought I'd be working with the women and children of Ukraine. So I had brought some craft items, felt and buttons and calendars and different things like that. I had a suitcase half full. And so now I had to teach for 4 hours with no curriculum per se to these kids. And some of them could speak pretty good English and some not so much. Hannah and Igor were two of my best speaking English students. And so they would often help me with the class. Julia, Victoria, Michalina. Julia had a pretty good understanding. The other two were a little more quiet. Oleg, he was considered to be Igor's brother, but they weren't brothers, they were cousins. I thought they were brothers for like 3 days because they called themselves brothers, but in Poland, your first cousins are your brother, called a brother. They're not called cousins. And then Adam, the one on the right side, he was my most artistic and outgoing, and he was a lot of fun in class too. This was my classroom. I taught outside every day. I walked down that path from my room to that outdoor patio area, covered tent, and that was my classroom. And those hanging in the background of the classroom are collages, because again, you gotta come up with something, and we're teaching English. We're supposed to talk English all the time, not give in to the kids. And so we studied transportation. And then we studied animals. We had zoo animals, wild animals, domestic animals. We did nature, leaves and grasses, and then we did recycling and conservation one. So every day I had to come up. So preparing for this was like 3 hours a day too. These were the kids every morning having their little calisthenics right outside my window around the courtyard there before they had breakfast, and then they came to class. But you can see how beautiful the weather was, higher than normal. Normally it's like, high 60s, but we got up to close to 90, no air conditioning, so it was fairly warm sometimes. This was my room. My window, I had brought tulle because they told me, well, you could use tulle for a window screen to keep out the mosquitoes. Well, my window only opened about this much at the very top. It leaned in, so I couldn't really put tulle there. And I had to have the curtain on because otherwise it was daylight all the time. And so I didn't shut my window for 2 weeks, day or night, and I had one fly in my room. So that was it. So that was pretty lucky. Oh, I gotta show you one thing too. See that pillow? That was like a big taco shell. It would go right around my head, so I couldn't use that because it was so hot. So I used my little airport pillow and put my ear between the hole and, kind of so I could have some airflow around my head. And then they have the big comforter on the bottom, and I kept that rolled up the whole time, didn't use that. I had brought a single sheet that somebody had said, bring a single sheet, saved my life. The campers put on a national Polish program for us. They did a formal march, and they gave us some history of Poland, and they were so obedient, so quiet and respectful. It was really wonderful to see. When I went there, I didn't know I'd be doing all the camping stuff with the Polish kids. I thought I'd be working with the Ukrainian women and children. But what I came to find out is for them, the Ukrainian women, the language, they didn't have that skill. When we were with them, they thought they had to be in hostess mode. Can I get you a chair? I baked a cake. They were always doing for us because this was their temporary home. And there's new Americans and Canadians coming every week, so it's like, how do you mesh with those people on those short hours? For us, the language was also a hard thing to overcome. We needed a translator with us 24/7, or we need a Google Translate, but our internet was so sporadic, I hardly ever could get on the internet. We had a desire to help. How can we help? And we had an understanding to their commitment, meaning we knew that they were solidly behind their husbands, fathers, grandfathers, cousins, whoever back in Ukraine. Because again, these are women who actually saw the war come right to them. Oh, that slide got out of order. That was just my classroom. This is where they lived. They lived in that top floor on the right. This was an old schoolhouse, so you had to go up cement stairs to this one room that was probably about this size. And there was the volunteers that had come in April had made a square table for them. And then there were 4 bedrooms off the edge, and about 8 people slept in each of those rooms. That on the end down there is a daycare, but their kids were so traumatized that they had not yet been to daycare because they feared, the little ones feared leaving their mom's side. So that wasn't utilized by them so much yet. This is the playground where I was a hot, sweaty mess most times I played with the kids. I didn't understand Ukrainian, but when one little boy said, we'd go 1, 2, 3, and he'd say something, I knew it meant do it again. So after about 22 times of doing it again and letting the swing go over my head, I was sweating as 100 degrees. The bus came and said, Shellee, we're going, are you gonna get on the bus? And so I was one who played with the kids a lot. And so they had a great sandbox, had great sand and not one sand toy in there. They had this old rusty, the merry-go-rounds that we've deemed too scary to use, but that's what they had. But the kids were kids for the most part. This was my 2 people that did translating for me. Dominika on the left, she's holding our spaghetti. Just take note of that. I'll tell you about that later. Spaghetti, and then Penny and Sebastian. Sebastian's 25, Dominika's 22. They both had been to Polish camp before and have come back now to be translators. Sebastian just grew to love us old ladies. I'm not sure why, but he even sent us his thesis now to read. He just applied, he's got for his degree. He sent us a copy, and it's on the spy gadgets in James Bond movies. So I have not really fully understood it all yet, but I told him we got it. These are 2 of my teammates, and I think to be lifelong friends. We had a Zoom call about 2 weeks ago, and we talked for 2.5 hours. Pam on the left, or on the right, is now going to be a global volunteer coordinator at some of their camps. And Penny on the left is from Bainbridge Island in Washington State, and she and I plan to go to wherever Pam is and hassle her on that first call that she takes, so we're good. This is the Ukrainians. In this picture over here, this is Helen, her mother Zina. The little girl with the red hat, you can't see her face right now, is Veronica. There's those 3 in that group. Veronica's mother could not get out of Ukraine. She is a medical person, so she stayed in Ukraine, and then she was surrounded by Odessa when the Russians came there. So when I left, she still had not been there. So that grandmother is raising that little, about 5, 6-year-old girl, along with her other daughter, Helen. Now, Veronica's like any little child. She just would be naughty sometimes, but the grandmother just did not have the heart to scold her. So it was Helen's duty to be the bad cop and be like, Veronica, knock it off, So they're working it out. On the right is Una and her 2 boys, David and her littlest one. He made such progress while we were there. When Pam was there in April, he never left her arms. When we were there early, the first week, he never left his mother's arms, or if he was in the stroller, only she could push him. And by this picnic, he is now walking around the picnic shelter with us. David is the little boy who sang that song in the back seat. Una's husband called the first time we were visiting with them at their home. And I was here, there was somebody between, and Una was on the edge. And she was looking on her cell phone, and I could see this man, he was wiping his eyes, and I was getting choked up over there, thinking, what news? And she was saying, I love you, and she got off the phone, and I said, yeah, he was even crying, and she said, oh no, he was shaving. so, so they can be in communication if there's good. First, if you see Tim there giving us the peace sign, you'll notice that Tim is wearing a Mankato Moondogs t-shirt. First with me, I had given most of those, and I took all those suitcase, and I said, you can keep the suitcase because they use that for a dresser drawer. Otherwise, they're living out of paper boxes. And I haven't been there 5 minutes yet. Comes to the picnic, and he's wearing the Mankato Moondogs t-shirt. So I know Roger, in his way, is smiling and supporting that work that's done there. On the left is another story about trust. And this is what I think we don't often, I don't know that we get put in these situations very often. But Helen, that's Katya behind, and that's Dorota, who's with the phone, and she was our director. Pam had been there in April and helped them set up the site. And so she had gotten to know Helen a little bit, and Helen asked where she's from, and Pam said Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Helen said, oh, I have relatives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So when Pam got back, good on her, she called those relatives, and they met their chiropractors and stuff in Oklahoma. And I live there all the time. They're not refugees. And so she got to know them. So when we went back this time, she said, I know them, or met them. And this exchange, what's going on right here, is when they had time to leave, and we often think about this, if we had 90 minutes to leave our homes, what would we take? Now, some of us might want to take grandma's big antique something, but you can't take that in time of war. They had to take small things. And she had taken family jewelry, and she did not dare mail it through the mail, but she wanted it to be out of the area. She gave that to Pam to hand carry back to the United States, to get in touch with her relatives, to hand it over. And that's after one visit. So these people put a lot of trust fast in people that they trust. It was kind of emotional. But here's kids playing tic-tac-toe, and we had a kielbasa picnic, we had a borscht picnic at their place. I went bowling with them one day, which was hysterical. We were on the 3rd floor of a building bowling, and the balls were fairly light, like kids' bowling balls, and they would go like this, and the balls would about hit the roof. Mothers and children, they didn't know their own strength, and then boom, the ball would crash down. And sometimes it would make it down the alley, but most of the time it made it in the gutter. Well, I'm not a bowler, but I had 2 strikes right in a row. Oh, they thought I was just a ringer, and I beat everybody that day just from having 2 strikes, so you can tell that. But it was a lot of laughs, and then we had pizza afterwards, and those are the kind of moments that you spent. Did I miss? Okay. And here we're at our camp having the kielbasa supper. I had 2 kielbasa suppers, and yes, the sausage was as good as they say it would be. This is the road in front of the camp. This is the road the cars drive on. We are in the country. I walked with Pam 3 miles to the next little village down this road, and that's what you see. It's beautiful, it's quiet. You don't see 4 million refugees there because they're mostly in the towns, but so there was peacefulness there. This was Andre, our driver, who spoke, I think he understood a lot of English and would be smirking to himself, but he didn't talk a lot of English, so he probably heard a lot of like girl chatter, you know, and smirking, but he was always willing to pick us up wherever. We went on the day, and you'll see that tower in the background. We climbed that tower, and I could see Belarus, Ukraine, and Poland all at once, so that we were that close to the border. I had to register with the State Department, and they said, do not go into Belarus. And we were told not to go in there. We crossed this river, and as you can see, they're loading our car and stuff on a ferry. 2 guys have the awesome job of pulling cars back and forth across that little river every day, every hour. And this is the sign at the top. It was a joint effort of Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. But unfortunately, Belarus is on Russia's side. And so it's fraught with danger right now. That's just looking down from the tower. This is across from the tower, and you can see the blue sky. I had weather like that most of the time. It's a very picturesque part of the country. But it was a crucial time during the war. There's a lot of bluffs in this area, and the people dug in and went into those bluffs to keep themselves safe from bombing. Not this war, because this is in Poland, but during World War II. Poland celebrates these couple people. They have a lot of people, but these two in particular, Chopin, and their airport is named after him. And Maria Curie, she invented or discovered radium and polonium and how to use radium for treatments for cancer. And her work left her nearly blind and with cataracts and chronically ill. And I don't know which book club it is. It's my Diamond Creek book club or this book club or both, but we read a book called Radium Girl, and it is about American women working with radium during the war and what they suffered and how that was tough to expose. This building is in Shellee, 20 miles away from the camp. This is where the mayor is. And the mayor of this area invited us to come there and talk to him. This was the whole group from one Canadian, all the rest from the United States. Sebastian is from Poland, he's up in the corner. But all the rest of us were volunteers at that time. I never saw those people except on outings because we were in the country with our kids. They were in the cities and, working with the children that were in homes and things like that. So a lot is going on. You don't see all of it at one time. The mayor thanked us first for coming to work with the Polish kids and teaching them English. Global Volunteers has been doing that for 33 years. They've been sending volunteers there. If you go during the school year, you go right into the school system and you work during school hours. If you went like I did, you work on a summer camp and you get that immersion program. So he was appreciative of that, but he more wanted to thank us for being the United States of America. Being from the US, we're major contributors, and he said without the US support, Poland could not stand up to Russia on its own. They're doing the humanitarian part, which is costly for them, because here's what they've done. For those 4.4 million people when I was there, free health care, free daycare. If they needed a medical bed or a wheelchair, they got it for them. If you're of Social Security age and you wanted to apply for Social Security, you got it. They gave it to you. And then they took you into their homes besides. So they are doing all of that. Now, not everybody wants to be on Social Security in Poland because, frankly, most of them want to go back. But you've seen what Putin continues to do to that country. It'll be a long time before the areas these people fled look like it was, or even livable like it was. They will move back, I'm sure, before it's even very nice. But it's going to be a while. And who is Poland going to be left with? The chronically ill, the disabled, the maybe dementia patients, who knows? The people that can't go back. And Poland has stepped up and said, yes, we will do that. The Polish people, when I was there, do you know what gas was a gallon? $12 a gallon, $3.99 a liter. They buy it by the liter. And when I just looked before I came here, $16 a gallon. So when I came back to the United States and people were about ready to overthrow the US government because gas was $5 a gallon, I was like, we really don't know hardship yet. And so, just as you're tempering your comments about how hard our life is, just think. This is Warsaw. This is Warsaw today. The building on the right was built by Stalin. Stalin said, do you want transportation after the war, or do you want a building? And the people said, give us transportation, so he built a building. So they have a not very nice word, which I can't say in church, but they call it. And then the other side of the street, this is right across the street, there's the modern Poland. It's just superimposed upon each other from that picture alone. It's very modern. They've done so much in the time they've had. This is those little bubbles in the middle are a transportation hub where all those people are on the corner. That's a Hard Rock Cafe. Inside that is a mall with Bed Bath & Beyond and Nike and all the stores in there. So they have everything that we have here, and they've built it into this city. This is their transportation. They have 7 lines of transportation right here. And trains go faithfully up and down. Well, like a liter of gas at $3.99, it's used a lot. And so I don't have enough time to tell you today, but I had a couple experiences on that thing. This is the Jewish ghetto. The wall behind those walls were where the Jews were kept during the war, and this is a memorial out front. You can see that was blocked off, those underneath there, that we couldn't go walk through there. But over and across, this is what you saw on the other side. The tall buildings, and you see them in movies, tall buildings. We've not knocked them down, they've refurbished them. That's a big plaza where we ate lunch that day. But this is how skinny the streets are, and it feels like an old town. But it's clean, absolutely clean, thriving little shops. Here again is the sunflower. Well, that's the playground. Here's the shirt that we got this shirt when we left. Now, unfortunately, the one Canadian also had to get this shirt. So it has the Polish flag, the U.S. flag, and the Ukrainian flag, the U.S. flag, and then the Polish flag. So I will wear it today. I have to go home and take it off, otherwise I'll have a big ketchup stain or something right here, because always happens if I'm trying to save something. Here is Ukraine, and you can see how Russia and Belarus have so much of their border. There is no way they can do it without us. Right now, I just looked up before I came here, Vladimir Putin, as of yesterday, has now blocked the grain exports again. So what it means is Ukraine is the largest exporters of grain. Now he's backed out of the agreement, so now that grain is sitting there again and not moving, which will mean we will see higher prices. But more Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, they're all worried about it. My home country, my family's from Finland. When I called them, there was a family reunion there in July, and I said, well, I'm going to be in Poland, and they're like, I said, aren't you a little worried about holding a family reunion? And they're like, oh, Shellee, that's so far away. Well, about 2 weeks later, they're applying to NATO, and now they're becoming a NATO member because they didn't think Russia would invade them, because they have a big, long border where people have intermarried. It's called Karelia. And they thought just by having those 2 countries having family in that border would keep the Russians away. Well, that's exactly what it is in the Donbass region and all along there. It was people who, with Russia, married Ukrainians, and then they kind of pulled towards the Russia side. So Vladimir Putin thought, well, I'll just go in, get a wide sweep, take over that Black Sea port, and that'll make him happy. So that's why the war started. Or at least I think that's why it started. Poland became independent on November 11th, 1918. So when you think about that, that's just more than 100 years ago. But they became democratic after they had an election October 27th, 1991. So all of us could know that date, that Poland became independent. Ukraine was founded in 1922 when Russia and Ukraine merged together to be the start of forming the USSR. And they declared themselves independent from that August 24th, 1991, 33 years ago. That is why they're fighting so hard. They know it can be taken from them. They know what happens when they're under communism rule, and they want a better life for their children. I saw a great-grandmother. It was Una's grandmother, great-grandmother. No, her grandmother, her kid's great-grandmother. And she was maybe 8 years older than I am. And I not toot my own horn here, but she looked 25 years older than me. She looked so worn out. I saw her one time, and she ended up in the hospital. The elderly generation in Ukraine have seen some awful things during their time. This is how many deaths as of October 11th when I made this slide. 6,221 deaths of civilians in Ukraine. Poland has recorded over 6,600,000 crossings. Ukraine's GDP is down 35%. Military spending in Ukraine is 4.13 of their economy, and in Russia it's 4.26. Since January, and this again was a few weeks ago when I made this slide, we've provided $52.311 billion in aid. We are the largest country with the highest, we are the largest giver. The country with the highest ratio of giving is Latvia. Latvia is a small country, but they know if Poland can't hold up or if we don't stay with them, their country's next. So these countries have a lot at stake. Oops. I'm just going to close with this and then one comment. This gives you the words to that song.
Наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо. Буйнесенький вітер широких степів, хто прославить по всій Україні січових стрільців, а ми тою стрілецькою славу збережемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо, а ми тою стрілецькою славу збережемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо.
So there's as they sit with Germany, Czechoslovakia, Slovakia, Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Russia. We don't know what's going to happen, but they're fighting back, and the citizens are committed. They've taken back 6,000 square miles when I made this slide. The soldiers don't want to leave the battlefield even if they're injured. They want to get fixed from their injuries, whether it be an artificial leg or a hand, and go back. The young women did not leave Ukraine if they didn't have small children. If they were married or single and no children, they stayed there to try and help. So the women, the people that have come are the ones that either had to take care of a family or an elderly parent or small children. And I just ask you to keep praying for Ukraine.